Thank you, Madam Speaker, and it's a pleasure to join in the debate on our opposition motion today, calling to the scrap of the first carbon tax and scrapping the second carbon tax as well, to put more money back into the pockets of hardworking Canadians, Madam Speaker. And I do want to talk a little bit about the current state of affairs in our country. And I had a disturbing text from someone that I've known for a long time, and this is how he sees what's happening in our country right now. This country is basically parts of the Titanic sliding into the abyss of the Atlantic. 5 years ago, we wouldn't recognize the country we have today. I shudder to think what we will think of the country that we will become in 2028, Madam Speaker. And this is a hard-working gentleman, a guy that's worked his whole life, created a good life for his friends and family, and he just sees this country as continuously going in the wrong direction, Madam Speaker, and he wonders when people in this chamber are actually going to stand up for Canadians and talk from basically a passionate point of view of what hardworking everyday Canadians see our country as going down, in which direction it's going. And I'm going to try and do that a little bit today, Madam Speaker, in the vein of our motion and talking about taxes and what the tax is really trying to accomplish, Madam Speaker. So the first carbon tax that was implemented after the 2015 campaign was supposed to reduce emissions across our country. It was supposed to be an environmental policy. The problem with that, Madam Speaker, is it has had no environmental effects on our country. Over the last 8 years under this government, they've never hit an environmental target with their carbon tax or any of their other environmental policies. Actually, when they flew around to the junket at COP 68 or 53, I can't remember what number the COP was this time, but when they all flew in and were eating caviar, they actually came out and said, Canada's the 58th country out of 63 for environmental targets. But the Liberals never talk about that, Madam Speaker. So if you're a hard-working Saskatchewanian and you're looking at your country and you're looking at your government, and they keep asking you to pay more and more and more because it's going to be good for the environment eventually, and you see that there are no results happening, then you start to question if this actually is an environmental policy at all, or if it's just a tax and grab, Madam Speaker, and if they just want to fill their coffers with more of your hard-earned dollars. You see, a government's never actually earned a dollar. The only way the government actually gets money is by taking it from someone who earned it in the first place, through work, through investment. They get it through the taxes of the hardworking people. The government doesn't earn anything itself, Madam Speaker. It takes, and then it gives back on the other hand. And that's the other argument that the carbon tax that our Liberal friends and NDP Socialist friends put forward is, no, it's revenue neutral. And they've been saying this for years, Madam Speaker. These Liberals and the NDP have been saying this, it's revenue neutral. I've never in my life seen a government program run on a revenue neutral basis. Canadians never get what they put back when they give to government. It goes to government, it goes to a department, it goes through many different hands, and then out the other end comes much less than what the Canadians gave to that government in the first place, Madam Speaker. And the parliamentary budget officer came out and said, what we had said since 2015, that there is no, even before that, Madam Speaker, I remember Premier Wall saying, there's no such thing as a government revenue neutral program. And he was right, because the parliamentary budget officer came out and said, yeah, there is no way 8 out of 10 Canadians are getting back more from the carbon tax than they're paying, Madam Speaker. So it's not revenue neutral. It has had none of the desired environmental effects that it was supposed to have by making Canadians pay more for everything. And then they say, no, it's a market mechanism, is what some of my colleagues on the Liberals would say. The NDP are okay, they just want to take more money from people that earn it. So they're okay. Socialists always believe government can spend money better than the person that earned it anyway, and we'll never feel that way. But some of the Liberals, no, it's a market mechanism. Just wait, it's a market mechanism. So we will actually put in policies that will make people act differently. Well, Madam Speaker, in my province, where I come from, it's very hard to act differently when you're planting fields or when you're harvesting. There's limited options of harvesters out there, Madam Speaker, and many of them will continue to run on fossil fuels. So you can actually implement a government policy that makes that process, planting, seeding, harvesting, run differently, because you have to use the fuel in the machines. Maybe a generation from now, there might be the capacity for electric combines and tractors. I would like to see that technology if it ever happens, but it's very far away, Madam Speaker. So for a government to implement a policy which they know adversely affects the agriculture sector, adversely affects the oil and gas sector, because there are no other technological options right now, is, I think, quite frankly, dishonest, Madam Speaker, and something where don't say that this is going to be a fair tax, because it does hit different parts of our province, our country, in different provinces differently, Madam Speaker. For example, the carbon tax 2 that we have talked about the last couple of days is going to cost Saskatchewan people net, the total cost is going to be $1,117 for a family. So if you add carbon tax 1 and carbon tax 2 on what the Saskatchewan family is going to have to pay, it's going to be $2,840 more dollars this year alone. And Madam Speaker, I know lots of people, well, what's $2,800? Well, to some families, that's a grocery bill and a lot of different groceries. Some families, that's new shoes for your kids. That's a lot of families can use that extra $2,800. And Madam Speaker, these aren't families that are trying to not be environmentally friendly, Madam Speaker. In Saskatchewan and Regina, Leuven, you have to heat your house when it comes to wintertime. It's pretty cold, and I think we'll find out when you come there to CPA here this in July. Like, it's pretty hot in Regina too, and you have to cool off your house in the summer, Madam Speaker. There's no options. So when a government comes forward and say, no, we're going to change the behavior of Canadians with this policy, there's just some behaviors that you have to continue to hold on to, Madam Speaker, whether it's driving your kids to hockey or school. Rural Saskatchewan is a big place, and you don't have many other options other than to drive. There is an Uber. You can't get Uber in rural Saskatchewan quite yet, so that's not an option. There's no bus service, Madam Speaker. You need a vehicle, and you need to drive. So that's why when we stand on our feet and talk about the carbon tax, and I'm trying to lay out some of the arguments that my fellow Liberals and NDPs will throw back at me, why some of the people we represent do feel a little bit jaded when it comes to this government's policies, because they feel over the last 8 years they've really been left behind in Western Canada. And another thing that I would ask is getting tougher and tougher to see any paycheck at the end of the month. Heck, even halfway through the month, some people are running out of paychecks. A lot of people probably had Lobby Day on the Hill with the food banks across Canada that were here. Well, Madam Speaker, I had the opportunity to talk to the food bank CEO from Regina, and there's some numbers that are staggering, Madam Speaker. They call them points of service when people come in and get food, Madam Speaker. In Regina last year, the point of services was 120,375. That's a lot of people coming to get food in the city the size of Regina. This year, the point of service is 171,451. And that's a number, but these are people and these are families. That's a 42% increase, Madam Speaker. So when we hear about the budget being so good, and we've never had it so good, Canada is at the top in G7 numbers for GDP, debt to GDP ratio, well, that doesn't really sink home. Because a lot of people are asking and saying, if the country's in so good a shape, and the country has so much money, why isn't there more money in the pockets of Canadians? Why don't they have more money to make it to the end of the month if the government's doing so well? And I think that's a question that my Liberal colleagues and their junior partners, the NDP, they can't answer, because they stand up day in and day out to the Finance Minister talking about how good it is in Canada and how everyone should be happy, except there's 1 in 5 Canadians skipping meals. There's 1.5 million people using the food bank every month. Food bank usage in Regina has gone up 42%, Madam Speaker. There's students that are literally sleeping on couches because they can't afford rent. That doesn't sound like a country that's doing very well. So when we say we should scrap the carbon tax 1 and carbon tax 2, it's on behalf of our constituents we rise up and talk about these issues and why we think they deserve to keep more of their hard-earned money, Madam Speaker. Because at the end of the day, if the policy's not working, it's literally the definition of insanity to keep on increasing it and doing the same thing and having the same result, Madam Speaker. Thank you.